What's good guys, and welcome to the SYNTHO YouTube channel. Have you ever sat down to start a project and are just feeling uninspired? Well, here are my 4 best ways for starting a project from scratch. This video is for people who are stuck in a creative rut, are just bored of starting a track in the same way, or need to breathe a new lease of life into their creative process. Let's get stuck in.
SYNTHO.
So the first way we're going to be starting our track is by looking at our drums. They're the foundation of every piece of music, so it's really great to start with this process. Because I'm going to be working with a dance track, I'm going to set the foundation as our kick. The kick is the dance instruction, so every time people hear this, they know it's time to dance. So we're going to have this as our core part that we're going to work around. I'm going to be using a 909, and I'm going to simply put in our 4/4 kick pattern. Rather than spending years and years and years searching through samples, we're going to use classic drum machines as our foundation for our drums. We know they're tried and tested in world-class records, so we know they're going to work in our tracks as well. This means you're focusing more of that creative energy on creating and less time finding the perfect sample. So for our hats, we're going to use the 808 core kit. This is all within Ableton stock stuff, and we're going to input our simple hat pattern. Now we're going to duplicate this across and we're going to use more of the 808 kit. We're going to add a rim shot next, but this time we're going to use the arpeggiator so we can start playing more complex groove patterns. So we're going to add the arpeggiator and change it to 16th note grooves. And we can start by playing some complex groove patterns using the arpeggiator. This is an amazing and quick way of creating some really complex groove patterns. You're going to be spending less time on the timing of your percussion and more time on the creative flow and sound of it. So let's press record and see what we get. You'll see there as well that I created a 4-bar loop, because this means that there's more to work with. I can either shorten it to a 1 or 2-bar loop and choose the best parts out of it, or simply use the 4-bar loop to keep things more engaging for the listener. Let's duplicate this one more time, and then we can start adding our clap pattern. We're going to use the same concept of using a longer loop, so we have more to work with and more for the listener to engage with. We're going to keep the arpeggiator on, because then we can add some more complex clap rolls, and again help make our groove more exciting. Let's record it in. If something doesn't quite work, we can always edit it and have it in a nicer sweet spot. From here, let's fill out a few more layers and really build up the groove. This time I'm going to be using a 606, and again we're going to add the arpeggiator to really speed up the process. 16th notes and we're ready to go. We're going to be using a mixture of the close hat and the open hat. Here we now have a nice complex groove that will then become the foundation of our track to work with. Finally, if we need that extra push of inspiration from our drums, it's sometimes good to use a percussion element that adds a bit of tone. I'm adding this percussion sound, and then we're going to add a few little effects just to give it some space and then really add some nice texture to our groove. Let's add an EQ and some ping pong delay. Shorten the delay, pull the dry wet down, and just take out any low end, just in case. And then we just need to make sure these are now quantized. So I'm going to make sure that the grid is set to 16th notes, Command A or Control A, and then press Command U or Control U to quantize this. And we have this really nice foundation for our groove. Now that I've got my drum groove laid down, I'm feeling nice and inspired to add new elements to my track. I could then start by adding a new bass line or other elements and really flesh out the project from there. Another amazing way of starting your track is going to be working with your bass line and melodies. Now there are two great ways of working with it, either choosing a complex bass line with simple melodies or choosing a simple bass line with complex melodies on top. Generally speaking, it's good to choose one because it gives you more creative freedom with the other section that you're working with. We're going to start by using a simple bass line and adding a nice complex melody on top of it. We're also going to have the kick rolling as the foundation just so we have something to work with. So let's record in a nice simple bass line. We can even just use one note for this. Make sure it's sidechained. And already now I'm feeling nice and inspired to write something new on top of this. All I've used is one note and played in a really simple pattern. I've now chosen my lead sound, and because I have a nice simple bass line, I have lots of room to write a nice complex melody on top. Again, I'm using the arpeggiator here to really simply and easily write a melody. I'm focusing more on the quality of the way that I'm playing rather than the timing of it. Now I'm feeling incredibly inspired to then finish the track off, add more layers and really beef it out into a finished track. Now we're going to write a more complex bass line and have some more simple synths on top of it. Because this bass line is more complex, it means we have less room to work with our top synths. However, there's still a lot we can do to work with the bass line since the bass line is our main focus for this particular track. I'm going to add a nice fifth stab sound, close that cutoff frequency a little bit and see what we can have on top of it. Now that was nice, however I didn't press record, so what I can do is press the MIDI capture button and I can still then add that to the new clip. Again, let's press Command A and then Command U to quantize. Make sure that clip length is 4 bars and now we're good to go. Very quickly then, I've got a complex bass line with a nice simple stab lead on top. And now again, I'm feeling nice and inspired to fill out this track and really push it on to a nice finished project. My steps now from here will be to start adding some drums and looking at arranging it into a full track. Next up, when we're starting a new project, we can work with vocals and samples. There are lots of different ways of working with samples, and we're going to start by chopping one up and then also looking at using the entire sample itself. This can be a great way to give inspiration for new ideas, as that vocal or sample can give you clear creative direction. So I have this as our main vocal sample.
Who got the funk junkies? Who got the funky beat? Who got the funk junkies?
And now I'm also going to add this same vocal but onto a MIDI channel. I'm then going to turn this MIDI channel into the slice section, and now this has sliced the vocal onto different parts of my MIDI keyboard. Let's add an arpeggiator just like we used in our previous techniques, and we can really start to play some cool complex ideas. Let's press our MIDI capture button, and now we have a really cool vocal chop. Now that we've chopped out that vocal and laid out a cool pattern, we can start to add more ideas on top of it. I'm going to play something in a similar pattern to our vocal chop with a new lead. Again, using the arpeggiator to help lay these ideas down really quickly. Now let's put in a bass line, a nice simple one. Let's quantize it and let's put this in. Then we can move from our chopped version to the original part of the sample, and we can start to create a bit of a mock arrangement from there. By chopping up the vocal, we could then create new ideas to work around this. We moved from the chopped to the original sample, which creates new arrangement ideas, as well as providing inspiration for where we go with our bass lines and melodies. In this example, I worked with a vocal sample, but this will work with anything from a pad loop to drums to disco samples. The choice is down to you. So if you are feeling uninspired and your bass line and drums aren't working for you, go look for a sample you can chop and be creative with and see how it can inspire you. Finally, the next tip to starting your track will be working with your effects. Whilst it may seem a bit different to be not working with your core elements, sometimes what you need is some inspiration to get the ball rolling. This is really key to starting your track, is not worrying about the specifics and more just trying to find that inspiration to work with your next element. So with effects, it's good to have some tonal elements for you to work around. By picking a key to work with, you then got some direction on where to go next. For this, I'm going to be staying in the key of F minor. I've used a gate to chop up this particular sound. Nice and resonant. And I've also got this weird wonky effect sound. Now I wouldn't class this as a lead because it really stands more in the background of the track, but this might be the inspirational item that's going to then push me on to move on to my next thing and really start to build the project from there. I've got lots of delays, I've got this LFO moving the erosion, and it's just a really cool effect layer to have in the background of my track. By combining these two effects layers, I've now got the foundation to work with, and actually it's going to make my project sound less dry. Sometimes we put ourselves off because we compare our tracks with the finished versions of other tracks, and that's because these new ones will have effects versus our ones will be very dry because we don't have all these layers in. So if you start by working with your effects in the first place, it means you're not going to neglect them, but it also means that your track is going to sound much more full and complex. From here, then we can combine some of the other techniques used in this video to then build up the rest of the track and really fill out the project. I'm hoping that using these four methods, either together or separately, you're going to stay out of the creative rut and spend more time making music. If you're ready to take your music to the next level, then make sure you go check out the SYNTHO app.
SYNTHO.